Hey everyone, it's Mr. White. I'm going to run you through the steps of the process for step 3 of your project. It's going to be different than the original outline that I gave you, and I apologize for that. But this will put a lot of the work into Excel, and it's going to do a lot of the work for you, and we're still going to have the chance to explore this concept of loans and how interest payments start to build up. So what you've got here is I've got my tuition costs. These are from the University of Georgia. I pulled it from their webpage. I also have the loan amount needed. What I did to calculate this was multiplied 75% by those tuition costs that I have listed for my first through fourth year. And then whenever I do that, like we've seen before on Excel, I can click this little blue box, drag it down, and it will copy it. My government loans, we can see from the table that is linked to in the project description that there's only $5,500 that you can get in government loans for your first year, $6,500 for the second year, and then $7,500 after that. So I've put those amounts in there for a government loan, and seeing that I know that I need more loan money to figure out how much I need in private loans or whatever other loan method that you decide to use, I've simply typed in the formula of the loan amount needed minus the government loan and pressed enter. And then I can come to the blue box and drag that down as well. And then over here at the bottom, I've just done the sums of those by doing sum and then selecting those. If you have questions about that, you can ask me, but you should be able to set this page up by yourself. So what we're going to do is we are going to calculate the different, we are going to calculate how much we are going to have to pay in interest and how much our monthly payment is using some formulas that are built into Excel. So I've added another sheet to my Google Sheets document, and you can do this as well on Excel. I don't know if Numbers has these formulas, so just be careful with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this my government loans tab. Okay, so for this information, in order to do these calculations, I need to figure out what year am I talking about, the interest rate, the number of payments, and the excuse me, and we also need to know the principal of the loan for each year. So I've got year 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, for this setup, I could come in here and type in the principal and the interest rate. Interest rate we'll go ahead and type in. That's 5.05% for the government loans. And if you come over to the blue box, again, click and drag it, and it will populate that. Number of payments, so in the project description, we talked about that these are 10-year loans usually, and so you pay monthly. So 10 times 2, 120 payments. So I'm going to do 120 as my number of payments. Again, click and drag that over. And then for principal, you can type these in manually if you want, but I would recommend, I'm just going to do equals. Come over here to basic info, that tab I had before, and my government loan for my first year was $5,500. So I'm just going to click on that box and press enter. And now that number gets populated here automatically. And I can do that with each of these boxes so that, and the reason I'm recommending that you do this, and the reason we use a lot of formulas in Excel instead of just typing in things manually, is because if for some reason you find that maybe you did this tuition cost wrong, or something happened here that was incorrect, as long as you've typed in the formula, you'll be able to go back. You won't have to manually adjust all of this. It will fix itself when you fix your formulas here. So it prevents you from having to do work multiple times while you are, if you have to make any adjustments, okay? So now we're gonna come down here and figure out what is our monthly payment, okay? And this is going to use a formula that they've got built in, and I think it's pretty handy that this is existing, okay? The formula that we're going to use, and I'm double click on that, is PMT, okay? So if you type in equals PMT and then do some parentheses, it now will tell us what we need to enter. So it first asks for our interest rate. So our interest rate was right here. Let's see if we can get this box out of the way. Okay, so right here is our interest rate. So I'm going to click on that. But because this is a monthly payment, we actually need to divide that by 12. So I'm going to do the interest rate divided by 12 and then do a comma. Now it asks for the number of periods. That's the number of payments. Well, lucky for us, we've typed that right there. So I'll click on that one, type comma. Present value, that's basically your principal. Because this is used for things like investments and things like that, present value is the phrase that it uses, but we're going to just go ahead and say principal. Okay, and that's actually all you need. I'm going to close the parentheses, and I'm going to type that in. Now, if you notice, because this is an accounting software thing, it makes it negative. We don't want it to be negative, but all I have to do is come back up to the formula up here, and I'm going to put a negative sign right in front of it and press enter. Ta-da, there it is. Okay, now that seemed like a really complicated process, but lucky for us, we only have to do it once. As I've said before, this blue box is the best because I click and drag it over, and now I've got all of my monthly payments listed there. Okay, now we also want to figure out what will be the total amount of interest that we have to pay in order for this particular loan. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. We're going to use a formula that is built for this, but you can also use some of the information from your basic info sheet. But we'll look at both of those methods. I've decided to simplify, so we're just going to do the more basic calculation here. So I want to know what's my total interest that I'm going to pay. Well, I already know that I'm paying this monthly payment 120 times, okay? So if I want to know how much I'm paying in total, I'm going to just multiply, in parentheses, my monthly payment times my number of payments, okay? I wasn't done. I accidentally pressed enter. But we do see that we're going to end up paying $7,016-ish. But in order to figure out what's just the interest part, what I can do is subtract the principal. Okay, that's the amount that the loan that I got. So if I press enter now, I can see, okay, about $1,500 in interest total. And again, if I click and drag over, I now have the information that I need for my the rest of the project, the amount of interest that I'm going to end up paying. Okay, so now I also want to do the same thing. If you noticed, I have private loans, and most of you probably will have that as well. I need to do the same thing. So my recommendation is that you just come to this tab and duplicate it. Okay, and I'm going to rename this private loans. And then here, I'm going to fill in the information that is relevant for me. Okay, I'm going to do it after I pause the video for a bit, but you'll fill this in with whatever information is relevant for you, and you will figure out how do these numbers look for your individual project. So I have done my private loan section, and again, all I did was change the numbers. If you've done your formulas accurately, they will all stay the same. And of course, if you had to add other columns because you're in school for longer, you can do the same thing, and when you click and drag, it should still work. However, you might have different loans if you're in graduate school or different things like that. You can totally ask me questions, and I will help you with those if you need some help. So, but what I need to do to finalize this, go back to my basic info. I've got my government loans and my private loans. I want to figure out like how much am I paying in total. So I'm going to make a column for government loan interest, private loan interest, and then total interest and total payments. Okay, and you'll see why that is in just a second. So for government loan interest, I'm going to put equals, come back to this page. It's right here. My government loan interest for my first year is right there. So I'm going to click on that after I've pressed equals and then press enter. Okay, and I'm going to keep doing that for each year so that it matches up. You can't just click and drag in this case because of our two charts are formatted differently. So that is kind of a bummer, but it's not all that hard. Obviously, I'm already done. I'm going to do the same thing for my private loans. I'm going to press equals each time I click on the box and then go to the corresponding interest payment for that year. And sometimes you type things backwards because you're not paying attention, Mr. White. All right, one more. Okay. And then my total interest. So for total interest, I've got two sources of interest, so I'm just going to add those two together. I always press equals before a formula and then just add those together. And now we can go back to the clicking and dragging, and that will total our interest. And then for total payments, this is going to be the loan amount that we needed plus our total interest. And I can click and drag that down as well. Okay. If you didn't catch some of that, you can rewind the video a bit and pause it and see what are the formulas that I'm typing in. If you're doing this the same way I am, the formula should be the same. Now, if you noticed before, I had some sums down here. I'm going to actually click and drag this box so that it'll give us the sum total of those. And just for clarity, because I prefer it, I'm going to highlight these. If you see this little box, I can click that, and now I have a little separator so I can separate my total from everything else. So I want you to notice this is our tuition cost, and this over here is our total payments. So notice a somewhat significant difference between those two values, and that we're going to end up paying a pretty significant chunk in interest. Once you have this information, we're going to use this for the other parts of the project. And again, I apologize that the formula part didn't work out exactly as I had hoped, but hopefully this guide and the work that we'll do in class will be helpful for you. So if you have any questions, email me, talk to me in class, see me in office hours, and we'll make sure that you're on the right path with this information.